and welcome back to End Times Prophecy News Update. This is Carrie Geren Scoggins.
Today we're discussing Adolf Hitler's radical conversion from the New Age movement and occultism, that of spiritual evolution and theosophy, to Islam, following the Imam Hajj Amin al-Husseini, known as the Mufti. Hitler states in Mein Kampf, "Hence today I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator by defending myself against the Jew. I am fighting for the work of Allah," referring to God as Allah, that of Islam. Prior to Hitler's radical conversion to Islam, Savitri Devi and Helena Blavatsky had led Adolf Hitler down the road into New Age Middle Eastern theology, that of evolving upward into a god we refer to as spiritual evolution, that is found in Hinduism and Eastern mystics. Many have looked at evolution as being a secular teaching. However, it originated in Hinduism, the teaching of spiritual evolution, that of evolving upward into a god from that of a lower life form through a process of death and reincarnation and rebirth. That represented by a swastika, the cycle of life, that traces itself back to the Egyptians in ancient times, and we see the modern day swastika carried by the Tibetan monks. Those that believe in spiritual evolution have bought into a lie that a spirit comes to this world, a lesser evolved spirit, takes on a lower life form, lives its life out, dies, and is reincarnated, continuously evolving upward through various stages of life forms. This process is called transmigration in the New Age movement. Again, it originated in Hinduism. The racist aspects that attracted Adolf Hitler in his early days in the occult and the New Age movement was the teaching that a spirit evolves upward into a god, but goes through many life cycles to reach that stage, eventually evolving up from a lower life form into a human, and the racist aspects thinking that there are lesser evolved humans, subhumans, that haven't fully evolved upward into the stage of the Caucasian male, and then would evolve up onward into a god that New Agers think of as a god-man or a demigod. This false doctrine originated in Hinduism. In the Indian caste system, Brahmins being the highest caste, they are worshipped as a god on earth. Because of their belief in spiritual evolution, the false doctrine that these individuals have evolved up higher into a god, and it's so ingrained in their culture that they believe, though Adolf Hitler continued to cling to the racist teachings and spiritual evolution, and continued to give out books by Charles Darwin, such as In the Descent of Man, where he speaks of his own beliefs in spiritual evolution, stating that eventually the Caucasian race will annihilate the lesser evolved races. During the Bible burnings, where Bibles were taken up and burned in the streets, and in their place was given out books by Karl Marx, such as Das Kapital, and books by Charles Darwin. During the meantime, Adolf Hitler had caught the attention of leaders in the Islamic faith, who already had mosques around Germany. The Mufti introduces himself to Adolf Hitler, and they quickly become something akin to blood brothers, both sharing the deep hatred towards the Jews. Adolf Hitler quickly converts to Islam and begins to listen more and more, even on a weekly basis, to his new Imam, Hajj Amin al-Husseini. The Mufti immediately takes one of the highest positions in the Nazi Party. He was entrusted to run 1/3 of the Nazi regiments. He immediately begins helping in the extermination of the Jews. In November of 1942, he meets with Adolf Hitler 2 weeks prior to the final solution. It is believed that he had the largest push of that of any of the Nazi Party in implementing the gas chambers. Many photos and historical documents led historians to believe that the Grand Mufti himself oversaw the blueprints and the making of the gas chambers in Auschwitz and other concentration camps. The Grand Mufti's leadership position in the Nazi Party led him to carry out the administration of many aspects of the Third Reich's endeavors. Meanwhile, he introduces Islam to the Nazi regiments. Regiments under his control began to wear the red fez with the Islamic symbol upon it. Many Americans have associated this Muslim attire with the Scottish Rite and the Shriners' red fez, also bearing the Muslim symbol. The Grand Mufti helps push the campaign to rid Germany of the high gay population. Nazi Germany had experienced a 20-year pro-homosexual movement, bringing in the New Age movement, occultism, and of course promiscuous sexual activity, including that of homosexual relations. The leftist culture of Nazi Germany had instilled an all-gay regiment, the Brown Shirts. The Mufti's plan was to decommission of sorts all aspects of the Nazi Party that opposed that of Islamic Sharia law. The de-Christianizing of Nazi Germany that had made way for the New Age movement and occultism, such as Theosophy, had now opened its doors to Islam. The New Age movement of Nazi Germany had seen many waves of different pagan religions, from the Norse gods to Hinduism, and again that of Theosophy. The all paths lead to God false doctrine in the New Age movement of Nazi Germany was used to de-Christianize the citizens, such as propaganda coming out in the Munich newspaper stating that Christians and Jews were, quote, arrogant for thinking that they had the only true God. We see this same anti-Christian propaganda here in the United States on our college campuses. The same New Age movement, the same occult teachings, and of course with the same outcome, the same anti-Christian hatred and anti-Semitism. The liberal New Age invasion America experienced during the 1990s was similar to that of Nazi Germany. Our Gays in the Military campaign was akin to their all-gay regiment, the Brown Shirts. Out-of-the-closet transvestites had become the norm in Nazi Germany. The Mufti, along with many scientists in Nazi Germany, believed that since homosexuals do not produce life, they cannot produce an offspring, that indeed that this was unnatural, and the scientists had gone from believing that homosexuality was just a genetic trait, that it was a defective gene. With the new reasoning being based upon the idea that if they could not produce an offspring, that eventually the human race would die out if everyone were either gay or lesbian. The Mufti continued to press this issue with Adolf Hitler, that it was a defective gene, and that the homosexuals would need to be exterminated, cleaned out of the gene pool, along with the Jews and Christians. He was heading Nazi Germany further and further into Sharia law. His plans with Adolf Hitler became Hitler's second book, The New Order, a translation from German, The New World Order. In it is in-depth plans to bring in what we now know as an Islamic caliphate under the El Mahdi, only under the guise of racial cleansing. Hitler and the Mufti did concur. They both wished for a global movement to instill their beliefs, that of exterminating the Jews and Christians while enforcing their totalitarian regime. As Adolf Hitler and the Mufti continued on in their plans for global dominion, the blood upon their hands had become vast. By now the Allied forces were at their doors. As more and more stories of the horrible atrocities of the concentration camps began to leak out, and the more the Allied forces pushed in, coupled with bad decisions made by the Nazi Party, eventually bringing this to a close, and that of the Nazi Party falling by the wayside. The Mufti, however, does not die during World War II and lives on to continue to spread the belief in this new world order, which quickly became known as Jihad, going on to form groups such as the Muslim Brotherhood, the Arab League, and he forms the World Islamic Congress, in which he heads up. He becomes well known and respected in the Muslim world, teaching individuals such as Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, of whom we now hear continuously bring up their wish for a new world order. The various factions in the Islamic world may have different ideas of how to carry out plans for global dominion, the New World Order, or if you choose to call it the Caliph, running the Caliphate, that of global dominion, where one such group plans to overthrow the United Nations, getting more and more Islamic members in the UN, and they've become quite successful at it, while other factions have tried to take over by bringing in more and more Islamic refugees and migrants into Europe, America, and the West, setting up Islamic no-go zones. One thing is congruent throughout the different factions of Islam, that is carrying on the Mufti's plan and the same propaganda. The Grand Mufti of Nazi Germany's propaganda has so permeated Islam that he's been deemed the father of modern jihad. Followers resemble the Nazi youth, as aspects of Nazi Germany are littered throughout the jihad movement and the various groups therein. Islam's long history of violence towards the Jews, coupled with their belief that it's justifiable to take slaves of anyone who is not a Muslim, and the sheer number of black slaves and sex slaves that Islam still has today. Just as the liberals have censored out the historical truth of the New Age movement, liberalism, Marxism, and invasion of Islam into Nazi Germany, the truth about how Nazi Germany had been taken from a nation that was a democracy and republic And instead of turning right-wing, as the liberals would wish you to think, they turned left-wing into Marxist socialism, the National Socialist Party. Socialism so big that they had to incorporate corporations into their government to provide all of these items for their people, ending in fascism. The liberals in America have also wanted to censor out other facts about Nazi Germany that seem congruent with the Democratic Party of today. Just as the leftists in Nazi Germany refused to speak out against Islam, modern-day leftist liberals in the United States also apologize for their behavior. Video clips such as this will never be aired by the liberal Democrat media.
Kuwait, with a population of scarcely 300,000, takes in close to $3 million a day in oil royalties. Not that these millions are allowed to trickle down, but to raise the standard of living of the people, of the Fellahin or the Bedouins. Instead, oil has brought in its wake a new biblical curse. It has raised the price of human flesh. Storage tanks and pipelines add a new and modern decorative touch to the vast emptiness of the desert. But they provide no sustenance for the people who live nearby, in hunger and misery and desperation. Water is precious, and the camel is precious. And to give the camel a rest now and then, water is drawn by slaves. These girls, 10 to 12 years old, are blindfolded to keep from getting dizzy as they take turns with a camel. The most modern equipment available is used to extract oil from thousands of feet below the surface of the earth. But water must be drawn by the effort of human slaves. For luckier children, there are model schools inside the palaces. The pupils pray before lessons begin. We are permitted to film the pupils as they come out of the royal school. More than 100, we are told, are children of the sovereign himself. Following them are the children of the princes and high dignitaries. They're clean, well-disciplined, happy children. But note that some of them do not carry books. These are children of the oil rich. Their books are carried by their personal slaves. Slaves received as gifts from their parents on their birthdays. Slaves who will grow up alongside their masters and serve as their personal gods. Most of these are children of palace slaves, and according to the law, they too are slaves. The oil millions turn into automobiles from Detroit, parking lots, and traffic cops who direct traffic straight toward the desert. We travel along the edge of the Sahara to reach the Peuls, a pastoral people once numerous and powerful, now reduced to a few thousand by mass raids of slave merchants early in this century. They no longer have any cattle of their own. The great herds they lead to pasture are owned by Arab merchants.
As the different sects of Islam debate continuously over how to gain global control in order to instill their caliphate, that which the Imam, the Mufti, and Adolf Hitler deemed the New World Order. The Islamic groups that wish to bring in mass immigration to Islamicize the West have gained much ground. Meanwhile, there are groups that feel there's already enough Islamic people inside the United States to just step out and take over. While yet there's other factions that want to strike out with terror attacks, hoping this will gain them ground. One thing is for sure, the Grand Mufti and Adolf Hitler's plans for a new world order are alive and well. And in this century, the factions of Islam that wish to gain control in the United States through getting more and more Islamic men into government positions as high-ranking officials, elected officials, and gaining more power in our military. When the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow, recently ran a story concerning the U.S. military being forced to bow during Ramadan, Islamic style, violating state endorsement of religion in our United States military, I began to see that it mirrors that which took place in Nazi Germany. The military regiments forced to bow at Islamic services to an Islamic imam, violating what we now have as separation of church and state. And the liberal Democrats have gone so far as to even issue turbans for the American soldiers. Many liberal Democrats seem appalled at the idea of stopping Muslim immigration into the United States. Yet, we've seen the end result in various nations across Europe, and we know what the end result of mass Islamic immigration is. From violence to the no-go zones and loss of civil rights. One would think that the Democrats would have the foresight to learn from the mistakes of the leftists in the socialist European countries. There's an old adage that insanity, by definition, is repeating the same activity over and over, getting the same result, yet expecting something different. We've seen this same scenario played out all across Europe in various nations. We know how it turns out. It's easy to look at where their beliefs came from, to then turn and see where they plan to go. This has been another End Times Prophecy News Update. Carrie Geren Scoggins, Ministry Edition. Thank you for listening.